sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. I know we might have a bit of a difference of opinion on that, but I hope people today feel a lot more confident that Canada works than they did a couple of days ago.
We get to see the maple trees, maple sugar on the maple leaves. We get the biggest wheat fields growing tall. In Canada, where we see the reversing falls. In Canada, we get to see them all.
G'day, eh? Well, hey there, folks. It's been a while since my last report on the Canadian front, and there's been a lot going on here. But first, check out our sponsor, Ground News. Ground News makes it easy to compare news articles from around the world and helps readers spot media bias through analysis and direct comparison. Designed to empower readers to compare multiple perspectives to see what details are emphasized, exaggerated, or left out entirely. They even have a blind spot feed that highlights news disproportionately covered by one side of the political spectrum. Ground News is run by a small team of independent media outsiders, supported by our subscribers and individual investors who are concerned about the future of the news, just like we are here at Political Drain, and we're happy to be partnered with them. For 40% off your Vantage subscription and to help support our channel, just use the link on our screen. Okay, well, let's get to the biggest story that's been happening here at home. The Memorandum of Understanding, or MoU, for a Northern Pipeline project that was signed between Mark Carney and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, she who flew her ass down to Mar-a-Lago last winter to beg for her province to be spared the wrath of the taco tariffs, completely contradicting the position of then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau while sleazing around with the likes of Kevin O'Leary. This is a surprising deal between Ottawa and the Western province, who have historically not seen eye to eye on pipeline projects, among other things.
The Prime Minister and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith signed a Memorandum of Understanding committing them to working together on building a pipeline to the West Coast.
At the core of the agreement, of course, is a priority to have a pipeline to Asia. That's going to make Canada stronger, more independent.
The two agreed that Ottawa would enable the export of oil through a West Coast port to Asian markets and adjust a tanker ban if necessary.
We have been working for some time on addressing the 9 bad laws, as I like to call them, that have been impacting our investment climate here, and I'm pleased that we've reached an agreement.
The Memorandum of Understanding could impact other oil-producing provinces like Saskatchewan.
We are a significant oil-producing province as well. There's a number of pieces in this Memorandum of Understanding that are going to impact how and where our energy goes in Saskatchewan as well.
Currently, there is no private sector proposal to build the pipeline, but the agreement could make it easier to attract the necessary investment.
It does provide now the first step in an opportunity to build a significant piece of transmission infrastructure that would provide not only wealth for Canadians and Canadian families, but provide energy security for places like India and other Asian markets.
Saskatchewan's NDP opposition calls the agreement good news and hopes that Saskatchewan will get something next.
The Prime Minister told the press, in the face of global trade shifts and profound uncertainty, Canada and Alberta are striking a new partnership to build a stronger, more sustainable, and more independent Albertan and Canadian economy. Carney said in a statement, "We will make Canada an energy superpower, drive down our emissions, and diversify our export markets. We want to build big things, and we're building bigger and faster together." Well, mixed reactions on the bigger and faster, and the deal pissed off a few leaders for going forward without their involvement, including the Premier of BC, David Eby, who has since softened his stance, saying he was open now to the pipeline as long as the tanker moratorium remains in place on the West Coast.
Premier Eby has forcefully pushed back on a new pipeline as recently as last Thursday, the day a deal paving the way for one to BC's coast was signed by Alberta and Ottawa.
No proponent, no route, no money, no First Nation support.
He seemingly has softened his stance, telling CTV's Question Period in an interview that aired Sunday, although he maintains his opposition to lifting the tanker ban on the North Coast, a new pipeline, something that could hypothetically go to Vancouver like the existing Trans Mountain, wasn't off the table.
If we can agree that the oil tanker ban is going to stay in place, then let's have those conversations. I think that would make life a lot better and easier in British Columbia in terms of our relationship with coastal First Nations, and we definitely take down the temperature.
According to BLG Canada's law firm, in an article dated November 28th of this year, understanding the regulatory impacts of the Alberta-Ottawa MoU on energy development, and says that sections 3.2 and 6 of the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act require the minister to consider adverse effects on the rights of Indigenous peoples when granting an exception to the ban on oil tankers along British Columbia's north coast. This underscores the central role of Indigenous rights throughout the pipeline project. We note that it's also possible the federal government intends to rely on sections 21 and 22 of the Building Canada Act, which allow the Cabinet to exempt designated national interest projects from certain federal legislation, rather than using the exemption mechanism under the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act. And there have been mixed reactions to the memorandum, all right, but it was great news according to most of the media. Ottawa-Alberta deal clears hurdles for West Coast Pipeline was the top headline on the Globe and Mail's website. Carney links new energy deal with Alberta, paving way for new pipeline, according to the National Post. But some think the deal is simply a pacifier for Smith and the oil barons and Albertans who have long felt left behind by Ottawa and federal policies and might not ever actually get built. According to Maclean's magazine, there are a few sticking points. The first is the need to finance it with private money. The timeline puts shovels in the ground as early as 2029, with possible completion in 2040. Ultimately, the future of a new pipeline depends on the hard economic realities of the market. A looming recession, supply glut, and slowing demand will exert downward pressure on oil prices in 2026, all of which could reduce pipeline profitability. Approval of the pipeline project under the Building Canada Act may create legal uncertainty. The Building Canada Act was enacted in June 2025 and has not been used for a major energy project yet, and gives the federal government broad powers to streamline regulatory approvals and exempt projects from parts of federal legislation. A key understanding is whether a streamlined approval process under the Building Canada Act will provide sufficient opportunities for Indigenous consultation. So yeah, there's a lot of hurdles yet to get past before any of this actually takes place. And the response in Parliament has also been filled with drama. Jason Kenney, a former Alberta Premier and Harper government cabinet minister, congratulated Prime Minister Carney and Premier Smith on an historic agreement. Even Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi called the MOU a positive step for our energy future. And the former federal environment minister Steve Guilbeault, formerly of Greenpeace, actually resigned from Prime Minister Carney's cabinet. Some say perhaps positively indicating that this agreement might actually produce a new pipeline. Oh no. Stephen Guilbeault was once arrested for installing fake solar panels on then Premier Ralph Klein's roof, while Klein's terrified wife is at home alone. Although he's resigned from the cabinet, he remains a Liberal MP. His resignation caused speculation that more resignations would follow. Executive Director of Nature Canada, Emily McMillan, writes, Stephen Guilbeault's departure from cabinet is truly a loss for both the government and for Canada. It should be a wake-up call to the Prime Minister that Mr. Guilbeault now feels unable to remain part of his cabinet as the government undermines environmental protections, its obligations to Indigenous peoples, and its responsibilities to all Canadians. And it goes on to say, Prime Minister Carney now faces a crisis of confidence in Canada's environmental leadership. Trust in his government may have walked out with Guilbeault, and nothing we have seen since the election has eased those concerns. Only strong action in the days ahead can restore it. An online abacus poll conducted after Mr. Guilbeault's resignation suggests that much of his reputation as a popular politician in Quebec may be a media construct. Only 25% of Quebec respondents said that they had a favorable opinion of the former Greenpeace activist, compared to 34% who were neutral and 19% who had a negative view of them. So replacing him and stepping back into a cabinet position is the former Trudeau Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, Mark Miller returning as the now Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture. Indigenous leaders held consultations with the Prime Minister in Ottawa last week in the West Block on Parliament Hill, while the chiefs were in Ottawa attending the Assembly of First Nations Special Chiefs Assembly, where Chief Watchmaker told APTN News they discussed many topics with the Prime Minister and the pipeline. Conversations also included the Natural Resources Transfer Agreement, which passed in 1930 and gives provinces control over land and resources without consent from First Nations. The Chiefs calls it that agreement unfinished business, saying it will take time to build trust in the relationships.
There's a lot of mistrust right here. There are a lot of people feel deceived about some of the political maneuvers by this government in terms of getting an MOU with Alberta.
What is important is that the work that we're doing here in this space has to align with ensuring that the criteria that are identified in major projects respect the interests of First Nations people to participate. This includes, even before consultation engagement, to ensure that proponents have brought Indigenous people in the space of the project. When it comes to major projects office, they are identifying the probability of a project moving forward. The duty to consult still lays with the Crown. This is additional work that we have to do. Everybody's in a different time and place in terms of their relationship, their desire to participate or not. We have to meet everybody in that space where they are in community.
According to the CBC, Natural Resource Minister Tim Hodgson faced a failing grade and a cancelled speech at this week's Assembly of First Nations meeting, as pushback grows among BC's chiefs over the government's new energy agreement with Alberta. Some BC chiefs say the Building Canada Act is failing its first test, accusing the Liberals of dodging critical questions about First Nations consent for a proposed pipeline from Alberta to the West Coast. Regional Chief Terry Teague of the Assembly of First Nations says his engagement with the coastal First Nations and First Nations in British Columbia, if I was going to grade it, it would be an F. Earlier in the week, the AFN passed a unanimous resolution calling on the federal government to withdraw from the Memorandum of Understanding with Alberta that sets the conditions for a pipeline to BC's northern coast, including a potential exemption to that coast's oil tanker ban. This MOU is a slap in the face of British Columbia, said Teague. They did this agreement without BC in mind. Meanwhile, the Métis people of Alberta are interested in an ownership stake, as Métis Settlement of Alberta president says a project could help their communities achieve full sustainability. Lemouche says the Métis settlements of Alberta are looking into accessing loan guarantees through the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation, which can help Indigenous communities invest in projects such as pipelines. He says the money generated from the proposed project could provide much-needed funds for the infrastructure, including roads, water, and wastewater in the Alberta Métis communities. If we get over all of those hurdles and start building this pipeline, will there be a market for oil and gas in the future as more people are turning to renewables and electric vehicles? According to the Tyee, another problem is that the oil sands are no longer Canadian-owned. Just 5 bitumen producers, happily referred to as the Big Five, account for about 80% of Canadians' bitumen mining and steaming. But Husky, Cenovus, Imperial, Suncor, and Canadian Natural Resources are largely possessed by foreigners. ExxonMobil owns 70% of Imperial Oil, while China's Hutchison Whampoa has 40% stake in Husky Energy. Finance giants like Capital Group, Fidelity, and BlackRock hold over 25% of the Big Five. So around 70% of the major oil sands shareholders are foreign firms. So why is our government proposing such a large and controversial and risky project like this? And the economic and environmental risk? Is it just over the tariff threat from Taco Tits McTrader? Even though we have still the most favorable of those ridiculous tariffs globally.
I have been trying for some time to sort of divine what he's trying to accomplish with his grand bargain with Alberta. I start from a couple of assumptions. I start from the assumption that he understands energy markets. He understands the things that you and I think, agree on around broadly where the global energy transition is headed and oil demand and things like that. and I also assume that he still cares about climate policy. It has been a driving force, a driving concern throughout his career. When he was governor of the Bank of Canada, governor of the Bank of England, in places where he didn't really have to care about climate policy, and he really did. So I don't think he's abandoned that just because he likes being prime minister. And so those were the lenses that I applied to the announcement on Thursday. I was at the TELUS Convention Center in Calgary, where they had the event, full house. He got 2 standing ovations, which does not happen in Calgary for Liberal prime ministers. The room was basically in love with him. The chatter was just incredibly positive, and I don't think he's sold out to Danielle Smith and her vision of the future. I think he understands that he has something of value to dangle in front of her, and that he can get things of value in return. His priority is not to protect the climate infrastructure that Justin Trudeau has built, in large part because a lot of that infrastructure is falling apart because the Trudeau government failed to defend it. His priority is very singular: carbon pricing. It will be industrial carbon pricing that drives the carbon competitiveness agenda, that drives investments in Canada, and that is the lens that he sees things through. And in this deal, if you look at the terms, he gets quite a few things that advance that cause. You get Alberta committing to a carbon price of $130 per ton. Right now in Alberta, in the carbon market, because of various shenanigans that Alberta has been up to, I think credits are trading at $25 to $30 a ton. So closing that gap is essential. He gets Alberta to agree to an expanded intertie with BC, which is super important for addition of more wind and solar in Alberta, more electrification. And he gets an agreement around just sort of the broader trajectory of carbon pricing, of industrial carbon pricing, that they are going to stop ragging the puck. Now, I know there's a lot of devil in those details. I agree. I think if things do not get ironed out in a way that include carbon contracts for difference, other financially binding mechanisms with Alberta, then this isn't going to work. But he gets all of his things much sooner than Danielle Smith gets her things. And as you and I both know, as I've written many times, the biggest impediment to building that pipeline in the North Coast, it's not David Eby, it's not even coastal First Nations, it's the economics. They simply will not get enough shippers pledging enough barrels to be able to build that pipeline.
Well, how do Canadians feel about it? An Abacus poll conducted days after the MOU's release shows strong awareness by Canadians of the deal and relatively strong support for it. Nationally, 55% said they were either strongly or somewhat support the idea, while 18% were opposed. While support was strongest among Albertans and Conservative voters, even British Columbians and Quebecers were in net favor. It's important to note that support for the idea of a pipeline to the West Coast found more support than opposition in every region of the country, Abacus report notes. What's more, and concerning, in my opinion, only a minority of Canadians said they support climate policies if they harm the economy. There is now unstoppable momentum behind clean energy investments, Carney said in a 2023 podcast, noting progress on climate change has been much faster and more impactful than people expected. And most Canadians recognize that demands for oil and gas cannot be simply wished away. Right now, and for the foreseeable future, oil and gas will continue to be a critical part of the global energy supply mix. If Canada doesn't meet that demand, other countries will. Canadian heavy crude oil competes directly with Venezuelan exports on the international market. We'd be happy to put the Canadian energy sector's environmental and human rights records up against Venezuela's any day. This is what Carney seems to be seizing on, and what he seems to have the blessing of a majority of Canadians to do. Unlike previous pipelines, there could also be a new market for bitumen products, like using the DRUbit technology, diluent recovery unit bitumen, which is a refined, heavier form of Canadian bitumen processed to remove light bitumen, making it safer and less hazardous and more efficient to transport.
Richard Masson, who's with a group that has a new project for a non-combustion use for bitumen to make roads with it. It's asphalt binder. Welcome to the interview, Richard.
Great to be here, Malcolm.
Now, Richard, you and I have been doing this a long time because I think I first interviewed you about DRUbit, Diluent Recovery Unit Bit, back in 2017. So this has been around for a long time, hasn't it? This idea of taking the diluent out of bitumen and then using it for some non-combustion use.
Absolutely. And part of the challenge with bitumen is you need to dilute it so you can move it in a pipeline. And diluent is scarce and expensive. And so there's been many different approaches over the years, partial upgrading, diluent recovery units that we've worked on. I was at APMC for a period of that time, and I've worked with other private companies trying to crack the nut. How do we make this system better, more efficient, and allow for our bitumen to be exported the best way?
Tell me a little bit about just the company, the consortium of Indigenous communities that have come together to create this company.
So Northern Nations Cooperative originated in northern BC and has been together for about 7 years. This idea has been one of the several that they're working on over the last four plus years. And Brian Law has been leading the business development end of that. So what we do is work with Indigenous communities who are interested in participating in the cooperative. We're going to set up a number of individual businesses that focus on their priority areas. And one of them is the group that I head, which is Northern Nations Midstream Partnership, Inc. And we're working on moving bitumen to Asia in line with what you said, bitumen beyond combustion. It turns one of the disadvantages of bitumen, which is that it's so thick and it doesn't flow, it turns it into an advantage because it allows you to transport it as a undiluted solid brick, essentially, which is non-hazardous and has cost advantages because you're not using this hazardous diluent. So it's one of the things that Alberta can really benefit from because we're a leader in this globally.
So is Carney just playing Smith, or is Smith walking away with a long sought-after prize? Her favorability in Alberta is waning quickly. She continues to govern or misgovern the province with her separatist statements and ties to MAGA politicians and cronies, and the dissatisfaction of many with her making a deal with Ottawa. How dare she? And now there have been 14 CPP and other MPs, as well as Danielle herself, facing recall challenges, which is hilarious and ironic since it was her party who had initiated Alberta's recall power. Right now, the targeted individuals include several cabinet ministers, backbenchers for the UCP, and at least one NDP MLA. A petition against Premier Danielle Smith has also been supported for signature collection. And Premier Smith, as well as other UCP members, argue the legislation is being misused for policy disagreements rather than intended major breaches of duty or serious misconduct. So is this the right move for Carney? Well, Charlie Angus of the Resistance and Mabel Midas puts it this way in his analysis.
Prime Minister Carney thought that by showing goodwill to the MAGA government in Alberta, that that they would stop or at least diminish their continual undermining of our country and undermining of our values. But that hasn't happened. So what's happened? Well, we see that it's alienated the British Columbia First Nations. The First Nations are speaking up. The entire Assembly of First Nations from across Canada passed an emergency resolution denouncing the government's deal. It's now caused a rift with British Columbia, with Premier Eby, who's been a very strong, solid supporter all the way along. That wasn't necessary. The Prime Minister has lost his top Quebec lieutenant, Stephen Guilbeault. I met with Stephen Guilbeault last weekend. It was good to speak with him. He now has another Liberal MP coming out and speaking out against this. There's going to be fallout from this. This pipeline is not going to go forward. Cutting deals with the Alberta oil industry to lessen their environmental responsibilities is going to face backlash. So Prime Minister Carney put all that on the table, hoping to cut a deal with Danielle Smith. And what did he get? Well, Danielle Smith's already moved on to the next act of political arson. She presented the pipeline deal to her base this past weekend, and they booed her. The MAGA Albertans don't care about a pipeline. They care about dividing our country, and they care about picking fights. So the Prime Minister went the extra mile, offered all kinds of incentives to work with the government in Alberta, and they just blew him off. They booed the plan. And now she's on to her new plans. What's number one is she's going to then fight the government on the buyback program on the AR-15 style assault rifle. She's got no jurisdiction here. She's just trying to press hot button.
Yes, there will be many more discussions and consultations and so on heading forward, and possibly a change in Alberta leadership, as well as there's been an ousting of BC CPP leader John Rustad in a caucus meeting, a vote of non-confidence. They don't seem to be winning back as much support as they once had, even with the West. The pipeline and the future of Canada's economy shows a commitment to our pivot from the past towards our future trade partners and markets, signaling a return to business as usual is not happening soon, if ever. So please make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell for more. We've heard that many of you aren't getting those notifications. And why not check out some of our merch? I'm wearing my nasty Canadian, eh?
Hey, yeah, you. Before you click away to watch someone unbox a tactical toothbrush, let's talk about something real. Political Drain isn't just another content mill. We're a digital front in a very real war. Not with bullets, but with ideas, with action, and with solidarity. We pair urgent news with critical education. And we build community around actual resistance, not the hashtag kind. The kind that moves. But here's the thing. None of this is free. It isn't. Behind every video is time, labor, research, and some weird guy asking if we're going to pay the hosting bill. And yeah, some of that money goes to things we can't necessarily say out loud. If you know, you know. Let's just say our special ops aren't Call of Duty LARPers. They're people making real moves to protect, uplift, and organize. You're not just funding a channel. You're funding a resistance network in a world where capital still calls the shots. Unfortunately, in a system built on artificial scarcity, even mutual aid has a price tag. And if we want to grow, if we want to win, we need your help. We need your help. So if you've got even a few bucks to spare, toss it our way. It's not for ads, it's not for merch drops, but for people making moves in the shadows so others can do it in the light. It's just us and you. So fund the mission, fund the fight, fund the future, because nobody's coming to save us. We save each other. That's how this works.